Okay, so the next thing we are going over this week is something called eases. Easing is a technical term in animation. Much to my surprise, your book doesn't cover this at all, which is such a shame, except to accidentally touch on it when we get to this assignment. So, since we already did the bouncing ball assignment, we can take a look at it. I can show all the frames. Let's edit multiple frames. There we go. Um, any of you who watched the videos I made for these, you will have noted that I kept talking about how things should be closer together here, further apart here. And this, I'd say, as a variation and, it slows things down, speeds things up. The technical term in animation that we're looking for is called ease in and ease out. And I will usually get it backwards which one is which, and I do apologize. And the reason that I might mix up which one is ease in and ease out is because, as I showed in an earlier class when we looked at all the old cameras, we are acting at an intersection between old school animation, which dealt with frames and the multi-plane camera and other such things, and digital terminology. And there is a pretty cool essay, slightly not safe for work language, but in Medium, where someone talks about like what is going on. And the thing with easing in and easing out is that in the old animation world, everything was about poses. So we have here a clip from Richard Williams' Animation Survival Guide, which, if you can at least check it out of the library, if animation is what you want to do, this book, a lot of people call it the Animation Bible, and it breaks down everything about how animators work. And I'd say it's fantastic resource. It's not the be all and end all of animation, but it does a lot of good. But when you read that, when you look at the other things, you notice that everything is dealing with poses. And so what this little essay author is pointing out is that in animation, the pose is the thing. So the pose in anime, in this case, would be where the ball lands. So if we're considering the pose to be where it's at the ground, then we wouldn't be actually, technically the pose would be up here. The pose would be up at the top because we ease into the pose, right? We slow down to ease into the pose, and then we ease out of it by starting off slow and speeding up, right? So when animators talk about ease in and ease out, what they mean is that coming into the pose, i.e. this frame at the top of the key, you are easing in, you're slowing down, right? So we started faster. If you're going slow at the end, that means you start faster. You ease into the pose, right? But to come out of the pose, you ease out of it. Well, do you see any poses here? I don't see any poses here, right? I'm making up the fact that this frame and this frame are poses because it makes it easier to talk about in terms of how animators talked about it. But we are not animators. We are, we are animators, but we're not old school animators. We are working on the computer. And the computer, for the developer's sake, looks at the whole thing. We look at this whole chunk right here from when it bounces off the ground to when it gets to this quote unquote pose. We look at things by the speed of it. So the idea of easing into the animation means you start slowly and ease into it, right? Like you ease into, like if the animation is the whole segment, like the whole span, or in the case of motion tweening, if there's a whole span of animation, then easing into it means you start slow, which means this is the ease in and this is the ease out, as in you have the span of animation from when it bounces off the ground to the top of the key, and we're easing out, or we're easing out of the animation because we started fast and we end slow. And if you're thinking, wow, that's two things that are backwards from each other, you're not wrong. And it's why different programs have different answers to which thing is ease in and which thing is ease out. And it's why your intrepid instructor, when she goes to show you the ease in and ease out, will probably get it backwards half the time. Positive numbers mean one thing, negative numbers mean the other. And so you just have to watch the animation and see if it's speeding up or slowing down, if that works for you. All right. So unfortunately, animators always dealt with poses, easing out of this pose, so going slow, and then easing into this pose, right, slowing down. But of course, as a computer person, if you look at the whole span of things, we have a very different idea. If you don't look at the poses, if you just look at the timeline, we're easing into the action and easing out of the action. So you're not wrong in thinking things are backwards. End caveat. So easing in and easing out is the technical term for making your animation not all samey, same. And our file to start off with that you can get from Blackboard called eases is all very samey, same. So I have a bouncing ball set up, and it falls down, and then it comes back up, and it doesn't come back up as far as it started. And if I watch this, that is terrible. That's no good. So obviously that's not how anything falls, and I mentioned in all the little videos for the bounce that gravity is acceleration. So we need this to speed up as it falls down, right? And then negative acceleration, as the gravity pulls on it, it should slow down as it bounces up. Well, these tweens have their own settings over here. If you're in 2020, you'll actually see like frame, object, document, like you'll see these things up here. If you're in an earlier version, click on the frame, you get the frame properties. If you click on the document, you get the document properties. If you click on the object, nothing happens. Wait, hang on. If you click on the object, you get the object properties. All right, but I'm going to click on the tween, and it's going to show me tweening properties. Right, so this is a frame property. We'll get to labels later. This is the sound if there was any. Right in the middle is something called tweening properties. And I'm going to turn on something called the classic ease, which is just a linear starts slow, ends fast, or starts fast, ends slow. And this is the part where I never know what direction I'm going in. I'm going to turn that all the way up to 100. Ease out. That sounds right. I can know right away just by looking. Nope, backwards. I turned on onion skinning. It's further apart at the top and closer together at the bottom. That is literally backwards from what I need, so I'm going to go to negative 100. So animate is using the animator terminology. If the top of the key is the pose, we are easing. Nope, if the end result is the pose, we are easing into it. Or actually, we're easing into the animation. There we go. I did have it backwards. I was thinking like an animator. If you think like a developer, if you look at this span, easing into the motion means starting slow and ending fast, and it tells you right there. In. And if I play this, it's hard to tell because there's no pause afterwards. I'm going to put a pause, hold at the end. You can tell the front end of this is just a little bit more natural. It's not great. We have to push it, but it's a lot more natural. So then I go to the back end of this. I go to the second half of the animation, and I'm going to ease out. So I'm going to go slow, fast at first, and it's going to slow down. I'm also going to expand the ground out. There we go. I'm hitting Control Enter to get the animation, by the way. So that's starting to look a little bit better, a little bit less mechanical. It's not great though. So I can go in to these eases. I can say classic ease, and it gives me this graph. It's like a little bit of a graph, right? There's a little bit of an ease on there. Starts off a little bit slower, gets a little bit faster. If I click on ease in, I'm going to start to get way more options. And don't worry if you don't remember your geometry or calculus or whatever this is. I sure don't. Just know that these different terms, see how the graph gets steeper? And also changes a little bit. Some of them, whoa, we don't need any bounces. But if I go from a quadratic to a cubic, I'm increasing the intensity of the change, That's the way you got to think about this. This isn't the graph itself of what's happening. This is a graph of the change in speed. So the further down we go, up until the quint part, is the intensity of the change. So if I change this to cubic, and I change the other one, whoops, nope, don't click the pencil. We're not there yet. By the way, this one needs to be ease out. And I change that to cubic. See how there's more, even more of a fall off? And I could keep going. I can go, oh, it didn't register. Oh, hang on. There it is. The front end did not register. Come on. I think we gotta double click. Much more better. See how it's more pronounced, the fall? So it starts off even more slower, and you can keep going. You can see the difference it's making. See how bunched these all are? And I come down here and I can see, there we go. That's a little bit too much, especially for this one. So I'm going to go back to the cubic one. There's no rule that says all of your eases have to be the same. Ooh. That's kind of nice. You'll remember if you watched the videos that I made, which I hope you did, look how close together those are until the very end. Look at that. I kept saying when it came to this, because even your book example doesn't push things as far as I think they should. I'd be like, you could put these really close together and then make these really far apart, and everyone was like resistant to that, and then I showed them it in the videos. This is so close together, right? Like this is so many frames on top of each other, still on top of each other, and then these are the only ones that have an actual space between them. And you can continue that all the way through. So I'm going to turn off the whatchamacallit there. And I'm going to go to add another keyframe. Bring this down here. Right click, insert classic tween. And you'll see right away it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. Look how it falls like a lead balloon. It actually speeds up. So what happens is it's slowing down as it gets to the top. And then it gets here and it starts speeding up again. It looks like something acted on it. So I got to go in here. I got to say ease in. It automatically goes to the one that I had, which is kind of cool. Ooh, no. So I need a couple more frames. So I drag select both layers and then I right click and I say insert frame. And that gives me a couple more frames. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to make sure we're extending both layers. And we need to make sure we give ourselves enough time. If you're going to have all this easing in and easing out, you need like enough time in here. But I'm thinking even quadratic one might be enough. Nope. That looks like a lead balloon compared to what was going on before it. Am I doing this backwards? Ease out. Ease in. I'm just not liking the look of it at all. Like it still feels like it's... Oh, it might just be because it's falling and not going anywhere. So the other problem with this is that our brains like things to not stop. And with the other example that we had in class, it was going off screen, right? So it was eventually going off the page. We don't have that here. So I need this to bounce up again. Create classic tween, classic ease, ease out. No, that's not a very good hover at all. There it is. So still kind of mechanical. I would need to like figure out exactly where I want things to go because, and I'm not going to waste your all guys' time with this, but the idea here is that you can tell the computer to go through things and not be linear about it. If you don't put any kind of ease on, it's going to be perfectly linear, which means it just goes back and back and forth, and we definitely don't want that. Now, the reason why it would take me a little bit of time to figure this out is because I have to figure out not only which one of these eases I want to use, but which ease works with how high I want it to jump and how long I want that to take. Because right now I think I maybe have a few too many frames in here to make it look nice. I think it's that it's taking too long. It's also probably bouncing too high. I don't think there's enough fall off. There's also, frankly, no squash and stretch at all. Yeah. So there's certain things that are always going to look a little bit mechanical until you put like a squash and stretch in there, which again, I'm not going to spend your time on. The point of this is to go over simply how the eases work. And these kind where you come over here work the same as for shape tween. Obviously, if you're just using keyframes, you're doing that manually. So the whole point of this assignment was to manually work in ease in and ease outs. And it's a lot more organic, right? Because it's not perfectly even. That's another thing we're fighting when we have all of these mechanical eases ins and eases out. It's the computer's idea of it. So I said before, don't click on this, but honestly, that little thing brings you to a curve, and you can manually change this curve. It works exactly like a curve. We've been working with curves all year round. That's an anchor point. That's an anchor point. This is the vector line. This is Bezier handle. If I shrink it down here, it's less influence. I bring it up here, more influence. So it starts off slow, and then speeds up. I can make this graph pretty steep. I'm trying to think. It's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit weird because what we're looking at is, how do I put this? The speed it's going is, I think, the slope of the graph. So the steeper, the shallower the graph, the slower it's going, and then the steeper the graph, the faster it's going. And I forgot to hit save and close. There it is. And so if I hit save and apply, shift it a little bit, we'll see what happens. Oh, yes. Okay, human touch. Never underestimate how much a human can fix things. What's bugging me about it is that the first part would be very nice, but then this gets very even. And so by pulling on this here, there is no preset for, no really speed up and go right into the thing. So I hit that, and suddenly things are much more what I was looking for. This one actually looks pretty good. Yeah, these outs were working much better. Oh, nope. You can tell how it's the inverse of the graph, basically. If this is bouncing off of the ground, I want... Right? The steeper I make this, the better it is. And I can already hear a few people saying, so wouldn't it be better to just go right to the pencil? You're not wrong. Starting with one of those little graphs will get you a curve that works pretty well. Oh, so much better. So much better. I tend to skip right to the pencil, to be honest. I thought I could give you all like a bit of a, extra help with the presets, but forget that. Use the presets to get the initial curve so you know what direction it goes in, right? So you know that an ease out, something that's slowing down looks like this. I don't expect you to remember that off the top of your head. I don't remember that off the top of my head, right? The computer told me, oh, if you wanted to slow down, it goes steep this way at first and then shallows off. Thank you for telling me, computer. Now I'm going to change the curve and make it look like this. Whereas the computer then told me that starting off slow and getting fast looks like this. But clearly, I mean, I'm hoping you can see it on YouTube. Everything except the last hover, which stops, just looks so much better. Oh, and one last thing, and we went over this, or I went over this in a lot of your animations. Insert keyframe. There's the temptation as this gets to be less bouncy to have it take less time. That might be slightly true. Whoops. Nope. 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 However, it should still take mostly the same amount of time. It's just going slower. So these shouldn't be shortening down to only a few frames. Not really. All right. So I've got this here. It's got to speed up as it goes. So I hit classic ease and I say E. Oh, now I can't remember. Ease in. And I do that just to get me the right curve, and then I immediately go into here and say I want this to be different. Save and apply. Look at that. It's almost starting to look like a bouncing ball. But part of what I wanted to show you is just kind of the process of setting up an animation. You saw I kept adding frames. I only gave you the first few keyframes to work with. Then you have to add, the rest if you wanted to continue it. You're not handing this in. It's just, but you can see how I kept, whenever I added frames, I had to add a frame for the ground layer as well. My ground layer does not have any keyframes on it. It only has regular frames because I don't want any animation on the ground layer. Let's see what else. And also keeping track of how much space I have in between these so there's enough time. I try out one ease. That doesn't work. I try out another one. Also save more often than I do because I haven't saved yet. Do as I say, not as I do. Eases 2. All right. But this is kind of part of the lessons I'm wanting to teach is not just, technically how to do an ease, but like watch the process of how I put these things together. Watch how this comes together. Watch how I try one thing, doesn't work. I watch, and I'm always watching it. I'm always watching the animation on here because I don't trust this. Yeah, this is nothing, and I'm sure Animate can like preview it just fine. But generally speaking, I don't trust it. And because eventually it will bog down and you won't notice it until it's too late. So get in the habit of always testing your animation.